What should you believe about modern claims of visits to heaven and hell? Well, there's a large portion of the body of Christ who will say they're unscriptural, dangerous, and even demonic. But why? Many critics reject the testimonies because they claim the things people see and experience can't be found in the Bible. But just because something isn't specifically mentioned in the Bible, does that really mean it should be rejected? What would happen if we applied this same reasoning to other testimonies Christians often share? Take, for instance, the number of people who say they were strung out on drugs, who stumbled into a church service one evening, prayed the sinner's prayer after raising their hand to receive salvation, and are now an on-fire believer. Where does the Bible ever mention God delivering someone from drugs or alcoholism? And how about the events leading up to the salvation? Where in the Bible does anyone raise their hand during an altar call to pray the sinner's prayer in order to be saved? What about testimonies of God saving a marriage or guiding the physician's hand through a routine surgery? None of these things are really mentioned in the Bible, but I bet you've never thought twice about doubting these kinds of stories. By the way, this extends out beyond just testimonies. What if we applied this reasoning to our churches? I don't recall reading about a church that lacked signs and wonders and never got more than a handful of legitimate converts. Do you? Yet that's pretty much the norm for the majority of churches today. So why all the doubts surrounding testimonies of the afterlife? Now, to be clear, if someone's account contradicts the Bible, that's an issue and serious cause for alarm. But there's an important distinction that needs to be made here. Something not being mentioned in the Bible is not the same as something contradicting the Bible. Also, here's a fact you've probably never really thought about. There are surprisingly few direct and specific descriptions given about heaven in the scriptures. When you look into the topic, most of the references that have been traditionally ascribed to it are pretty vague and even ambiguous. Some may not even be referring to heaven at all. So, if all there is to the afterlife is what we read about in the Bible, there would be less to experience and less detail than there is now in this present life. Another criticism of these kind of testimonies is people cite the passage in the book of Hebrews which says it's appointed unto men once to die. They say that since these people claim to have died and yet came back, this makes their experience untrue or demonic. First of all, it should be noted that many people who have had experiences of heaven and hell were not dying or even close to death. Many simply claim God gave them a vision, or they were taken up, or down. As far as those who claim they did die, this isn't really an objection. If anything, it's just a matter of semantics. If we truly believe that everyone is only appointed once to die, then the qualifications for death would have to be that the person stays dead. Therefore, the fact that they came back would not qualify. So the objection would be concerning the usage of the words dead or dying, but it would not have any bearing on the experience of the person. To better understand what I mean, imagine someone testifying about how they became a Christian by saying, "I found Jesus," then being told their entire experience of conversion never actually happened, because after all, Jesus was never lost. Likewise, simply objecting to someone's use of terms such as "I died" or "I was dead" does not in any way discount the experience. Now, many will say, "I just choose not to believe it." And that's fine. You don't have to believe it. Just like you don't have to believe when someone says God saved their marriage, God answered their prayer for a new job, God delivered them from drugs, or any other testimonies out there that are not specifically outlined in the Bible. This video wasn't made to tell you what to believe. Instead, we simply wanted to encourage folks to stay logically and biblically consistent in their assessments. Testimonies are a very personal thing. Every believer has at least one of them, and they all vary quite a bit. But if the only time you find yourself doubting or being critical of one is when it involves an element of the supernatural, then that may say more about you than it does the testimony you're scrutinizing. And if this is the case, maybe it's time you did some introspection to figure out why.